Pai, tēnā rā tātou, ka tīmata ake i tētahi wāhi karakia kia pai ai tā tātou haere i tata nei. Manawa mai e te rangi e tū nei, manawa mai e te papairaro nei, manawa mai e ngā mākuru o te rangi, o te whenua, tō manawa ko tōku, manawa ka whakairi aki ki ngā pātū o tēnā whare, kia tūturu o uta, kia turuturu o tai, tūturu whakamaua, kia tēnā haumie, hui e tai ki e. Nau mai, whakatata mai ki tēnei wānanga kōrero e homa, nōku i te Taitokerau ki Kāi Tahu, pekātu ki ngā iwi o te motu, nau mai, haere mai, nau mai, hoki mai, e ngā mate o te motu, haere mai, haere. Whakangaro atu rā koutou ki te tirohanga kanohei, ki reira koutou oki ai. Tēnā koutou katoa e raro mai nei, e rere ana ngā au o mihi kia tātou katoa, ka matu putanoa i te motu. Kei ngā matamata huanga o te tai, o uta whakatata mai, taringa pikari mai ki ngā kōrero o tokerau, e hora nei. Welcome once, welcome twice, welcome 3 times. Welcome to everyone this morning with high energies. It's lovely to see everyone gathered here today. I'd just like to introduce myself, your host for the day. Riri comes from Taitokerau. And we've also got our team from Practice Foundations who'll be in the background. We've got Jackie Chan, who has joined us from Practice Foundations in our team, who will be doing the illustrations for 2026 series. Jackie will share the start of her illustration at the end of our session, and the full illustration will be shared out online in 2 weeks. Also, please accept our apologies for any issues with any calendar invites this month. We will make sure that this doesn't happen again. So, ko te au o aroha, e rere atu nei kia koutou katoa. What we're looking at today is to provide a space for those that are working in public sector, who are working in complex environments, to come together with our like-minded people. We would like to acknowledge that this is a difficult time for many people, and we would like to encourage and support everyone to take good care of yourselves and each other as much as you can. We hope you find coming together today very restorative. We have Kelly in the background that is here. If you have any questions or any issues or concerns, feel free to reach out to her via the chat. We also want to let everyone know that we won't be allowing any bots like Read AI to attend these sessions. This is in order to keep this a very safe space for people to connect. And if you're unable to attend, most of the sessions are recorded and can be watched online. Our purpose, our rhythm that we're looking at today is exploring how we can better whānau and hapū leadership, governance and decision making. In this session, we are incredibly fortunate to welcome the legendary Kaye-Maree Dunn as our kaikōrero today, and in conversation with Sophia Beaton from Hikitia to Taitokerau. Kaye-Maree will share insights from her papakāinga mahi about what it looks like to equip and support whānau and hapū leadership, local governance and decision making in practice. So today, the flow of it will be that we do our whakawhanaunga as we normally do within small breakout groups. We'll hear a kōrero between Kaye-Maree and Sophia, and then go back into our breakout groups for some reflection time. Come together for a whole group kōrero following. So I ask that for our breakout session groups that we're going to introduce ourselves as we do normally, and then we're going to think about, this is the question, think about within our whānau or community, can you share an example of a leader and their qualities that you admire? Then think about what your whānau in your community. Can you share an example of a leader and their qualities you admire? Those are the things that we're going to think about, and when we go into our breakout groups, that's what we're going to do. Kia ora rā tātou. Ka pai. Loving the feedback, e hoa mā. Some good leadership, confidence, organising and admin, especially from Tāne. in service to community, unapologetic, clear, ka pai. Loving all the feedback coming through. Beautiful. If you want to carry on adding that in the chat forum. There were some other things that you missed. However, we're going to turn around. Ka huri ki te kei ki tō tātou, ki wā tātou manuhiri te rangi nei. Kia Kaye-Maree Dunn, he te Rarawa, he Ngāpuhi, he Ngāti Kahu, he ki Whangaroa, Ngāti Mahanga, Ngāi Tamanuhiri, Ngāti Kahungunu. As a co-founder and kaiwhakahaere of MEA, Making Everything Achievable, an Indigenous social impact firm, Kaye-Maree's mission is to lift the capability of whānau, hapū, and iwi to grow their collective prosperity through Indigenous-centred capital flow, design and technology. Then we have our other manuhiri, ahi tere, Sophia Beaton, he Kāti Māmoe, he Kāi Tahu, sits alongside our Healthy Families team at the runanga or Whangaroa, and leads a new Hikitia team working in prevention of violence across te Taitokerau. Tukuna te rākau kōrero, ki a koe Sophia, ngā mihi kia kaurua.
Oh, kia ora rere. Tēnā tātou, everyone. It's my real privilege to have this kōrero with my mete, Kaye-Maree Dunn. And I guess the first question from me to you, Kaye-Maree, is can you tell me a little bit about the beautiful place, your papakāinga Pukeote?
Tēnā rā tātou, and kia ora everyone for joining us today. It's so nice to be here with you all. And it's lovely to be in Tāmaki Makaurau, actually with other people, rather than kind of beaming in from my computer from the papakāinga. So shortly I'm going to share a little video so I can transport you to where I live, where I come from. But Pukeote papakāinga is based around 15 minutes out of Hastings, here taonga. Our whenua was one of our tupuna gifted the land that Te Aute College is based on, and we're like a couple of blocks up from Te Aute College, and the whānau that are my neighbours, Zach Makware and his wife Georgie and their children all live next door to me, so that's pretty amazing. I love that. And yeah, it was pretty daunting returning home for anyone that's decided to live next door to your whanaunga. Just being close to your whānau is one step. Having them as your forever neighbours is a whole other step as well.
Can you say a little bit more about that apprehension, Kaye-Maree?
Yeah, I've lived 25 years in Wellington. And then before then, I grew up in Friendly Fielding in the Manawatu. So I kind of think of myself as a townie city girl. And so the thought of returning home to my whānau in the country, I felt like, yeah, pretty nervous. Pretty nervous because I didn't feel, it's not that I don't know how to live in the country. However, it's been a while. And so there was a nervousness there for me. Will I fit in? Will I be able to, do the mahi? So I was a bit apprehensive, but I'm glad that I made the move.
Okay. Did you want to share your little video now? Because I've been able to have a little glance at it, and I think you're right. It does transport you into that space. Would be.
All right, I'm going to.
Technology is going to be awesome.
Yes. All right. So I'm just going to do a little big screen. So this is the papakāinga series on Māori television. And that's Pio Tere, our whanaunga from the Hokianga. And he goes around and spends time interviewing different papakāinga whānau. And I felt, before I kind of share my slides and talk to you about enabling whānau leadership and what that looks like on the ground, I just wanted to just take you there because it's a lot easier than me just talking about it.
Hilda.
Is it just me, or can no one else hear that?
I can't hear it.
It's not just you. I can't hear it either.
I think you just need to share sound on the presentation.
Oh, that was me. Okay, no, it's okay. Anyway, I just wanted to visually transport you because he's talking about being here on our whenua, and I just wanted to just introduce my cousin Zach. There he is. Yeah, so everyone, that's where I live. This is my cousin Zach. I'm going to talk a little bit about him, and he and Pio kind of having a yarn. What I will do is I'll ensure that the link gets shared with you all, so you can, I hope, watch not just this video, but all the different videos so that you can see not anything brand new, I don't think. This is just us returning to our old ways of being close to our whānau. And I feel like that's one of the greatest gifts for all of us as a community. Now I'm going to stop that and I'm going to go back to my slides as well. But Sophia, any other questions before I do my next little jam?
Yeah, I'm keen to hear a little bit more about your cousin Zach, and because he's been the driving force behind your papakāinga. And yeah, can you tell us about the journey that he's been on to make it happen?
Look, I wanted to acknowledge my cousin for a broad range of reasons, and I'll just, there you go. And this also answers your first question around returning home. And I just want to acknowledge this term that I picked up from Pou te mara, he mate mate aone, which is this visceral an indescribable feeling of returning home to where you come from. So we have this saying, tūranga waiwai, so this a place to stand. And I feel like he mate mate aone is this kind of deep ancestral reconnecting home. And I had awareness and understanding of it, but I didn't really understand what it felt like to be home. And that was primarily, as I said earlier, I grew up in Fielding in the Manawatu. We rented our 2-bedroom flat, and that's where I pretty much lived my teenage years, on a street with neighbours that maybe we talked to, maybe we didn't, and kind of living as a somewhat vagabond across Wellington City, being a manuhiri really on someone else's whenua, so mihi atu kia te atiawa, to actually returning home. And it was through my cousin Zach who asked so there are 10 homes there, and he asked me if I was willing to return home to the whenua. And as I said earlier, I was a bit nervous about it, but he really needed, a bit of awhi, and I wanted to acknowledge him because, and I'll talk about this as well, around different styles of leadership, and particularly leadership through wartime and leadership through peacetime. And I'm going to talk about why I have this, because there are specific skill sets around pushing, fighting, advocating, all the things that you have to think about, inspiring people, but also organising, coordinating people. And that energy is very different from when you're in peacetime, when you're around building connection and being present. And sometimes it's hard to move from this one to this one. And I think that not saying that that's Zach, but he definitely needed an awhi because I'm more the diplomat and he's definitely the sergeant major captain of the team. So together, I think our energies have worked out really well. Yeah. And so this is our papakāinga, which I've shown you before. This is where we're located. And I feel in the kōrero today is around enabling whānau and community leadership. But I think that this is really the laboratory, a living laboratory of taking my life's work nationally and working with different communities to actually landing my mahi with whānau and literally seeing the impact of my work every day in the way that I use my skills and influence to complement the skills of my whānau who have very different but similar skills to me. And how do we bring those things together?
Kaye-Maree, do you have that idea of bringing everyone's skills together and being able to create that community and enable whānau and community leadership in a space like a papakāinga. Can you talk more about that and what that looks like for you, for your whānau in practice?
I mean, I came into, I think, an already well-established template, which I think is important as a factor that one with whānau, but there was already a key whānau kind of base po, of which we all kind of, what would I say, regathered ourselves around. And I think that's really important in regards to when you've already got an existing whānau dynamic and a way of being, and then I'm kind of like, because I'm literally the last person to move into this community, you know, how do you align yourself and understand? And so I think the first thing I personally did was I spent a whole year observing. So I didn't do my normal, which is kind of, here's my ideas. I mean, I did, but I didn't implement my ideas straight away. But what I could tell and see was in place was that this was a whānau who are very adept and capable of working. So you can just do things without having to give instructions. They just had a rhythm and a way of being where they could literally psychically look and know what needs to be done. And I think part of that process around skill set is that you do need a rhythm keeper or somebody that sets a benchmark, and then everyone kind of falls into line to figure out what's needed. But you need that kind of person within a community to help set that standard and approach so that everyone's skills can then be utilised. And you've got to keep looking across all the whānau to go, hey, look, my cousin Clem is also at understanding water, so that's his particular gift in keeping our sewers nice and clean. Viv is a teacher, so how does she bring her teaching skills to the fore, especially when communicating effectively with children? Our other cousins are in the freezing works, so how do they bring their meat processing skills, which is critical. You would not find me trying to kill any animals at all, but we need those skill sets. And so how do you activate those skills and create space for those skills to shine?
That sounds incredible. I'm looking out my window now and there's a housing development that's popping up around me, and it has none of that richness that you're describing. And I know that like the leadership that sits within the community, you're exploring ways to activate people's skill sets. And I'm wondering, what role has government, either local or central, played in enabling or supporting or resourcing some of what's happening at the papakāinga?
Well, one of the great things about Zach's work, so Zach and his whānau were unfortunately impacted by suicide, and then he's also working in suicide prevention and has been involved in whānau ora development for, well over 20 plus years. And so it was thanks to the work that Zach, Te Tai Temu Trust, had been doing in community for a very long time, doing water safety, a whole bunch of different types of whānau intervention work, and his relationship with Tariana Turia and also Pita Sharples at the time, where they enabled Zach through whānau ora to develop a plan. And then that also then led to Zach and our whānau being able to access support through a specific papakāinga development fund to do the master plan, bring whānau together, and then work with the team to build out this particular vision of total well-being, intergenerational, returning back to our whenua, pā-oranga, which is essentially this place of total well-being, and how might we become self-sustaining and resilient. So also Zach is very close with Tā Mason Dury. So a lot of the kind of preliminary work and the dreaming came about through Zach and his and Georgie and others' experiences, and then looking to bring that to life here on the papakāinga.
Uh, well, the resilience pillars. Do you want to speak to these, Kaye-Maree?
So I think one of the key things around living together and kind of design principles and this idea of pā-oranga, which is essentially like a living community, is at the heart is tamariki, mokopuna, and on the right there are all Zach's, I think most of Zach's, if not all, no, most of Zach's and Georgie's mokopuna. And so these are some of the kids, although all these tamariki live on the papakāinga as well. So I can have these children literally walking in to come in and play and hang about. And then on the left-hand side is a housing summit, a housing expo that we hosted about 3 weeks ago. But again, just very self-explanatory, coming together as a community, resiliency, number one, a focus on food security, which is becoming even more pertinent right now, housing stability, security, income resiliency. So if there were any economic shocks or significant shocks, how do we ensure that we're resilient through that? Energy sovereignty, and then, as you mentioned earlier, all the different skill sets that we have. And one of the visions that is held in our community at the moment, there's 3 of us that work from home. But, you know, what could it look like for all of our whānau to be able to work from home on the land and be paid for it? So that's part and parcel of what I'm working with and on, is building up this economic base for our whānau to be able to work from home.
I can imagine that there's a lot of mahi that needs to be done as a collective on your papakāinga around all of those spaces. And I'm curious about like the collective decision making that happens around that. Like what sort of processes do you and the whānau have in place around collective decision making? Yeah.
Well, I just want to share these. There's 2. So my cousin has this tendency to send out these images or like messages to the community on a regular. And these are a couple of his resiliency models that I think are important. And it's the same thing. It's how do you map each other's skills? How do we look after each other? How can we create multiple income streams using our talents and our skills? And how do we stay strong and connected as a whānau? And then what does that look like in real time as well? And I love this. So there's a point here around governance and, you know, how do you kind of introduce this idea of governance when governance with general whānau feels like a very alien concept? And so there's some really important points here, I think, that are important. I talked earlier about leadership in battle time and leadership in peacetime. And there is a distinctive difference. And sometimes our leaders might not be aware of that either. But the process to move from here to here is intentional design. So how and when do you hand over, especially when you've dedicated your whole life and being to creating a community? And how do you do that process and keeping everyone's mana intact? I think that's a really important part. And how do you inject the same sense of love that into every single household so that that kind of vision and kaupapa is not just resting on 1 or 2 people? And so for us, like whānau is the infrastructure. And so again, coming back to that decision making, like how do you make governance sexy, accessible, meaningful? And it definitely comes down to relationships, yes. But I think it's incumbent, as I said, I know where my skills are as a facilitator, as a trainer, and also delivering governance training. And I'm constantly translating and finding ways to interpret the language so that it makes sense to our whānau, which is, this isn't alien, this is actually something you know. It's just that we didn't have the reo for it. But working on a marae, coordinating and organising resources for tangihanga, like all of that is strategic decision making. We're just bringing that same strategic decision making here home to the kāinga. So I think that's a really important point here. And I think equally our children also have to be part of that decision making. And again, that's easier said than done, because the adults have, you know, lots of things, competing needs and requirements, and then we have these children that are here as well. So how do we also build them up to participate in decision making too?
One of the things that I've heard you talk about before, Kaye-Maree, is that idea of building your muscle around creating, like having those collective decisions. So
Yes.
It's almost like in every single small collective decision, you're building that muscle for the bigger long-term stuff at the same time.
Yeah, because it's just unfamiliar. And so we have to get familiar with the language. And this kind of process around handing over leadership, as I said, it's not like, there you go for it, because I'm now the chairperson. So I then took on the role of chairing the Mahu e Pera Ahu Whenua Trust, who has the overarching legal and, I guess, moral responsibility to protect the papakāinga and all our tenants as well. And so you have to shift. There is like the familial relationship, and then there's also this other recognition that we also have commercial interests, because we've got to ensure that we can keep the lights on and that we've got to look after, you know, each house. And so that's a different conversation as well, and that you've got to balance out whānau expectations alongside being a responsible trustee, alongside health and safety. So there are many elements that we have to consider and think about. And so that muscle and building that muscle memory, I think first and foremost is ensuring that we stay and start where our whānau are, continuously interpreting and making that opportunity, that learning accessible, but people have to get into the driver's seat too. And so, you know, again, it's like, here's a job description, yes, but leadership is a lived experience, and therefore you also need the opportunity to be supported and coached into the role as well. So then you can build your confidence too.
Yeah, kia ora. The interface that your papakāinga and your whānau and community have with the outside world, like you're talking about keeping the lights on, and how does that connect in?
I think that, yeah, kind of talking earlier around I won't just go back one slide. This handing over the leadership, this is probably one of the most critical parts of community building. And, you know, when to hand over and how are important. And so, like I said, somebody that knows the plants and physically knows every single aspect of the whenua, how do you inject that sense of love into other whānau members who are like 20 and don't have the same love and passion for the whenua? And so there's the process and sharing the knowledge and understanding, which isn't always easy. You know, communication is probably one of the greatest challenges that we face as a community. But you have to keep working at it. But this idea of a digital twin as well, which was a way I thought of enabling our whānau to actually see the assets that we are responsible for and be able to, and so the reason why, so I should give the actual context. My cousin was, we have a camera and it tracks how many people go up and down the road, right? So there must have been, I don't know, hundreds of cars going up, hundreds of activity in a week going up and down. And people are like, oh, who cares? Who cares about how many cars are going up and down our little cul-de-sac? But what they didn't realize is that over time, those roads are going to have to be replaced. And therefore, if you don't have an awareness of what it takes to actually build a road and then actually look after a road and then fix a pothole, then how do you get that passion or a sense of urgency around protecting that asset? So I came up with my kind of, towny idea of creating a digital twin, which is that you can then have a helicopter view of the assets within our papakāinga. And then the aim for the digital twin system that we're looking at building is running some scenarios. So in the next 20 to 25 years, if there's a massive flood or if there's millions of interactions up and down that road, you'll be able to see for yourself the impact and why it's important that we actually think about managing and controlling the resource and access to protect it in the long run. And then if you then add not only what that will look like in 20 years' time, that activity, but also the cost, and you find a way to be able to bring that awareness together, that's not only building the muscle, that's also building, oh, that's what you mean. Now, that's quite different to then me trying to like ram that into you to say, you need to look after the roads. You need to be mindful about, health and safety. It's very different when you can actually present that information in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that interface between the mātauranga and the ancestral connection to the whenua and the bringing in the technology and the modernity of the life that we live in. Yeah. Did you want to speak to these lessons?
Yeah, I'm just checking in on timing, but I just have a few things that I just want to talk, particularly for those, because I'm just really grateful that you're all here to be part of this conversation. But I feel like if there were some takeaways for how do you work effectively with whānau that work communally, and I think there's three things. One, everyone is working within a constrained environment, and so how do you continue to be a change maker when policy has shifted, focus has shifted, and I'll be honest, where there's a lot of anti-Māori rhetoric that's kind of shared often. And so how do you operate effectively within that as enablers? So I think first and foremost, it's important that we trust the kaupapa of communities, and it's important to listen to whānau to understand and then figure out, well, where do we place ourselves? How do we actually enable, shift leadership and power into communities? This is important for any kind of co-design process. Initially, I talked about whānau as infrastructure, but equally whenua as infrastructure, a living being, our kin, our mother. How do we look at creating opportunities for whānau to be able to have security? So housing, food production, economic resiliency is all something that you can see within a papakāinga. But how might you be able to enable land back? Or create opportunities for the transition of resource back into the hands of whānau. And then equally, we're all constrained by this timetable of government contracts only running for 3 years and 1 year often. But how do we also invest in long-term relational agreements, high trust agreements? And I feel like that is the future. And also makes great economic sense as well. It's just working out the balance between the two.
And a community and a kaupapa like yours is already thinking in that long-term mokopuna investment. And I mean, the times we're in now with our energy crisis, how are you all feeling going into that space together as a community?
I think that, we're very lucky. We have a communal garden, we've got communal chickens, we've got animals, but all of that can be severely interrupted, and it is being severely interrupted in regards to the cost of gas. And we had a power cut a couple of weeks ago after we were like on the edges of a cyclone. And anyway, our power was out for 17 hours. And so we're very much reliant on power. So we were 17 hours without power. For many of our whānau in the north, they've gone days now without power. And so it really highlighted our vulnerability. So that was one. So we do have a project we were looking to create energy sovereignty and get all of our houses off grid. It was just, like if you can't put your water on because it's connected to electricity, it's not a safe place to be. We've explored this idea of carpooling from a papakāinga because we're half an hour, 40 minutes from, where everybody works. But again, everybody works at different times. So I'm hoping that a partner might come on board and sponsor a EV so that we can share a vehicle to use to get into town and do collective shopping. And then preparation. So our whānau are building a kota, which is an outdoor kitchen area, so that we can actually share cooking facilities and have a meal together, which we do, but becoming a lot more intentional about sharing kai together. And that's both practical from building and strengthening relationships with our neighbours, but it's also economic as well, that we can actually eat together and save money. And I think that that's the biggest concern is, you know, we've got a mortgage that we have to manage. We've got whānau who could all lose their jobs like that. And therefore, this idea of resiliency is very, very close to our hearts at the moment.
This might be a perfect time where we may be able to share it and get whānau to everyone that's listening in to start sharing back maybe in a breakout group. We've got a few pātai if you want to share those, Sophia and Kaye-Maree.
Remind us of the pātai. There they go.
Okay, pātai. So we're going to go to a breakout group. If you want to share the pātai, or would you like me to share?
No, that's Kaye-Maree.
Bye.
So the pātai for your breakout groups is what has emerged from our kōrero together. And what is one thing that you could start tomorrow from your place, from your where you work, that might support kaupapa such as this?
Bye. So we're going to go into breakout groups.
Cool. And then we'll have a yarn afterwards. I'll talk to some of these points as well around how we're building in resiliency across these 4 po. But looking forward to your whakaro and your feedback.
Bye. Pie, that's a very quick minute. Beautiful. Geez, looking all shiny. Lovely, fantastic. And I hope the kōrero was delicious. Now I'm going to ask Sophia and Kaye-Maree to come back. Just ask that pātai before we start to turn our gaze to everyone else's pātai that they have in the chat forum. Sophia, you had a pātai.
The pātai actually comes from an interview from one of the kuia and your papakāinga, Kaye-Maree, and she says, why can't we do it for all New Zealanders? You know, little villages, thousands of villages where we all work together and everyone feels comfortable in what they do and how they do it. And I just thought that that was such a beautiful pātai to put into this room and into this space, because I think there's a lot of richness in that and what it might look like.
Yeah, it's a good reflection. And we were having our own little jam session whilst everyone was in their breakout groups on how papakāinga village life is not new. It's not a Māori concept. All of us and all of our ancestors at some point lived close together. And I think that breakdown of community and connection is probably one of the biggest reasons why we have so many challenges in society at the moment. So I think the ability to return home, whatever home might look like for any individual, and the power of that to collapse so many social challenges like that, I think is so powerful, because you don't have to have a deep wānanga about all of these things. It just becomes your way of life. And so just being able to have a place to belong, I think, is powerful. Being able to learn how to get on, like the get along culture is, and I was saying earlier that, you know, it took us, I was 15 when my mum and her cousins came together to establish the Mahuepera Ahu Whenua Trust. That was 31 years ago. It took 31 years for that papakāinga to be built, and the actual development work took 7 years. And that was also around, $4 to $7 million worth of development that went into the build and all the work there. And so going from a vision and an idea and then actually building something, I think that in itself is a huge mammoth undertaking. However, in my view, the hardest work is getting along with your neighbours, communicating, staying graceful with one another, being patient, helping to see each other's views and perspectives. Like that work in itself, as Sophia mentioned, is a full-time job. The actual stitching of community and the fabric of community and dealing with conflict or hōhauterongo process of working through the challenges is a big mahi.
That question that Angie's asked about, she's also wondering about the tikanga for reconciliation when tensions arise.
Yeah, it's critical to have a process. And, we were talking in our breakout around the journey of moving from, say, an individual's perspective, like a vision, like all of the kōrero that I shared with you in those images, like that all makes sense. But if everyone within that community does not hold that same vision, how do you transmit, or how do people step in and create their vision? And so having a kind of top-down tikanga versus a collective understanding and awareness. So that basically, how do we manage each other's behavior? How do we manage our own behavior, and also how do we manage each other's behavior? And do we have a process? Especially when it might be very natural within a whānau to just go tuara, just to backbite each other, and that's just super normal. And then somebody from the outside go, ooh, why are you talking like that? So creating a process for us to say what's acceptable, what's not, what happens when our tikanga is or our boundaries are broken, and then how do you reset and create the opportunity for rebalance, and then hold space for everybody to be able to, self-correct and start to behave in a way that's acceptable to the collective. Like all of that work has to be done as well. And it's not simple or straightforward. And it's definitely more difficult if you don't have a tikanga or a kaua in place.
Bye-bye. Just another part I'm just going to squeeze in there, Sophia, from Marissa, is have you investigated or be informed by any intentional community models?
Yeah, so my background started out in housing, community housing, papakāinga housing, and we hosted the first National Māori Housing Conference in 2010, and that birthed Te Matapihi, which is the national Māori peak entity that advocates for housing. I've worked across kind of the homelessness sector, and then part of that work enabled me to travel the country to look at different papakāinga models. And before papakāinga was as many papakāingas we have now, before then there were more smaller, I guess, Pākehā Western intentional communities. So I talked about Tui community and Tākaka, and I was very interested in their decision making because they had like cards, that like red cards, and they have like a traffic light system as a whole community. They come together, they have a shared meal, and then they kind of make these decisions in a town hall style. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. How would that go? Well, Māoris having like these like red cards, green cards. But it was cool to see, oh, that's how they manage. And then Earth Song, I was also very interested in here in Tāmaki because they've been around for a very long time. And I think Tui community is a really good example because they were young hippies who wanted to raise their kids, next to their other mates. And that's what they did. They built their community. They had these gardens and shared kai. They built like tui barns as an income generator for the community. But then what happens when it's time to pass the baton across to the younger generation and they're not interested? Or they've lived close to other people. They're like, I don't want to live like that anymore. And I think that that's a reality. And these are those communities. But I've also spent time with I kind of hearken to Minginui, which was a Māori development in the Minginui forest, and beautiful idea, but not well designed. So they had Weet-Bix houses, and the houses were literally falling to pieces. And so the trust were trying to figure out, like, how do we have good quality, beautiful housing? And so by the time our papakāinga was developed, we'd learnt from a lot of the mistakes and also the opportunities. I wasn't part of that initial time, but I definitely am bringing, I guess, my style of governance into all the things that I've seen and observed, but then also being open enough to take on what I'm learning in lifetime from my whānau by listening carefully about what's working and what doesn't.
Cool.
Mel has a comment here, which is communities already hold deep capability, but that capability is not always recognised by formal systems. The public sector need to be paying closer attention to where leadership and decision-making already sit within whānau, and then adjusting so we're not adding unnecessary processes. And I'm just wondering, Kaye-Maree, what you think the capabilities and practices are required of the public sector to be enabling that?
I think that, again, like I'm mindful that there's a constraint, and I don't like talking, I'd rather talk blue sky, but I'm also mindful about constraint. And that means that you have to be very creative around the types of partnerships and relationships that you foster. So first and foremost, I believe in the power of social procurement. I think that procuring opportunities with communities to share their knowledge, their capabilities to support income generation is positive. So I think the development of co-design contracting is powerful. I think that finding ways, again, there's constantly going to be an imbalance between the Crown and community. And that is because there's already both legislative power and economic power that cannot often be matched by community. And so if you're aware of that power imbalance, how do you help create or enabling contracting or partnering agreements, which recognises, hey, look, we've actually got a hell of a lot more resource. How might we actually get that resource out into the community as quickly as possible? And then I think there's a third point, which I'm seeing as a theme and a pattern in the community sector, which is collaboration. And so collaboration, like the actual physical art of collaboration, is an art form, and it's not easy. And I think that Crown agencies can help increase access to training, create opportunities where groups come together to try and figure things out, but actually like consortium approaches, which used to be in fashion. It's not so much in fashion these days, but community development is really bringing in the community. And I think you need to be a great, yes, you need to be a visionary, but you have to be great at communication, great at organising and administration and project management again, to create the enabling environment for all of those respective groups to come together and co-design something beautiful.
Penny's asking about how you make governance sexy, how we actually recognise and build on the existing skills and experience of whānau.
Yeah, I think that the language of governance and law policy can be very alienating, and it's been alienating on purpose, because those who understand the meaning of words can use it for their own benefit. And so if we look at the history of Te Kōti Whenua Māori, which used to be Te Kōti Tango Whenua, it was designed again to alienate our people from the land. And then all the systems and processes around us was designed to deconstruct Māori society so that we were weaker and easier to assimilate into community, but equally to become the labour force of which we are in many ways. And so how we create language that reflects our community. So our marae, I think, is the greatest living example of leadership, and part and parcel of connecting whānau back to leading and growing is reflecting on the roles that we hold on our marae, and how, it's not just, which I think is the hard part around common sense, is actually not that common. And so what you think is normal and how you behave is not necessarily what I think is normal and how I need to behave. So if you've got a good strong base of, here's some ideas for how we might live together and work together, this is what the law says, and then this is also our own LORE, which is, this is how we choose to behave and practice to keep the vision and our kaupapa alive together. And it's a balancing act, I think, constantly. We are having to explain things in a way that makes sense, first and foremost, and then enable people to put their, oh, is that what that is? Oh, okay, yes, I understand that. And most people will be like, oh, and so just to take the time to translate, I think is really important. The most beautiful part is when you can step back and let people lead. But it's not just, oh, well, go on, you drive now, and you don't know how to drive or what you're driving. Like that, I think is not fair. But if you're equipping people with the tools and the knowledge to do the mahi, and once they understand and they can use the tools, they're away. And like I said, how do you explain governance to a whanaunga who has been a freezing worker for the last 30 years? So then I've got to go, well, how are decisions made with, on the chain? How do you know what the hierarchy is? And if somebody gets hurt, what happens? And when they can kind of talk like that with fluency, then you realize, okay, so take that idea and bring it across to here on how we actually manage our relationships and what happens if a kid kind of smashes off a scooter or gets cut on a piece of iron. Like, how are we going to manage that as a whānau and our health and safety responsibilities? And I don't know if it's sexy, but I feel like it makes it a bit more practical.
Yeah. I think we might need to wrap up. But it's been such an absolute pleasure and privilege having this kōrero with you today, Kaye-Maree. And I'm sure that there's lots that people have got out of it, and it sounds like it from the all the kōrero in the chat. I'll hand it back to you, Didi, or
Kia ora. Kia ora. I just want to stretch out what you've just said, Sophia. I can't thank you enough for the rich kōrero that you've shared today and just the way that we've run our session today. I know, and here's hoping, if anyone wants to hear more, maybe there should be a part 2 to this session, because I just feel like there's so much more to listen to. And a lot to take away from our kōrero. So once again, Kaye-Maree, Sophia, thank you very much for a beautiful session. Point 2 coming in the near future. However, I just wanted to acknowledge the beautiful kōrero. And if we didn't quite get to everyone's pātai, we will in part 2 to this kōrero. But thank you very much for everyone's time. We're about to close off our session today. But before we close off, I just wanted to also give a little mention. So as mentioned earlier in our today's session, that Jackie has completed the illustration. The illustration will be posted with today's recording in the next 2 weeks' time. However, we're just going to invite Jackie to share what it is that she's got in front of us this moment.
Aroha mai, it's mainly words right now, but there's so many awesome whakaro, so trying to harvest them all.
Thank you very much, Jackie, for capturing what you've captured so far to date. But again, everyone, in 2 weeks' time, you'll see the full final product of the illustration that'll be captured of all our kōrero shared today. So please share any feedback on our session, what you liked, what you didn't like, what was helpful, what wasn't helpful. Please add that in the chat forum and we'll gather all that information. But I just wanted to acknowledge our participants today for listening in to our conversation and sharing back any kōrero throughout our breakout groups. Here's hoping that you've got something to take away and action something in the near future. If you are new to Practice Foundations and would like to receive any email invites to these sessions, please sign up via the Code Design Lab's website or email the lab. Also, our next session, so don't get too excited. Nah, jokes. Everyone get excited. Our kai kōrero next week will be Tyrone Tangata Makiri, who will be talking about our AI civics next week. So, don't hesitate to jump back on again next week, next month, te hoama. And here's hoping that everyone has a wonderful day. Whakakapi ake I te wāhanga karakia, kia whakairihia ki te tapu, kia wātea I te ara. Kia tūriki whakatahai, whānau, hara mai te toke, haumie, hui tai ki.
Thank you.
Pai te rau e hoama. Thank you, Sophia and Kaye-Maree.